Welcome to Up Your Stack podcast. I'm your host, Noah Burke. Every week we feature some of our favorite HubSpot app developers who've either built their apps on HubSpot or integrated with HubSpot to help you get the most out of your HubSpot tech stack. And today, I have a very cool guest. His name is Max. He's pretty much famous already. You've probably seen him all over LinkedIn if you know something about the HubSpot ecosystem. And today he's here to talk about Hapily. Max, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Noah. I am thrilled.
It is an absolute pleasure to have you, by the way. This is going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah,
Max,
it's gonna be a good time.
For the benefit of the audience, what's your role at Hapily? And then what does Hapily do?
Yeah, absolutely. So Hapily, we are a HubSpot app developer that exclusively builds apps on HubSpot and for nobody else. And that's very intentional. We're all HubSpot obsessed. We grew up using HubSpot, worked in the HubSpot industry in some way, shape, or form for a long time now. We're very invested in seeing HubSpot be successful. But like the big kind of thing to think about us is like everything that we build extends the HubSpot experience, extends the HubSpot platform. It all very much feels like HubSpot because it all is HubSpot and it's within HubSpot, right? So like all the different apps that we build, you wouldn't necessarily use them on their own outside of HubSpot. You would only use them if you were a HubSpot customer. And we do everything from small little utility apps that solve like a very sort of specific migraine that the masses have, right? So you think of like our associates, TikTok today, Clone Attack, like a lot of these apps that like solve like for very one specific problem that everyone wish HubSpot just did natively, right? And then lately, we've not pivoted, but started investing a lot more into building more like products on top of HubSpot that feel like just HubSpot doing more, right? Through in the event space and now the CPQ space, and we're in like the Stripe integration space, things like that. So yeah, we just build stuff on HubSpot. So I am the chief evangelist over here. So my job, I mean, we're a startup, so
everything.
I can tell you one thing, right? But my job here is evangelizing, and I do that through a number of different ways. So one, most of our content production is done by myself and Dax, the co-founder. So I'm often the face that you're seeing a lot behind like a lot of the, frankly, sometimes unhinged content that we're putting out there into the ecosystem. So we do a lot of that, do a lot of stuff for YouTube, do a lot of the like LinkedIn engagement, things like that. Obviously supported by really awesome marketers that know how to take my craziness and turn it into something real and useful. But then I also manage all of our HubSpot relationships. I spent the first year here like building the partner program from scratch because we very much want to sell through HubSpot partners because we don't want to do any services, right? So I was building that until we just brought someone on to handle that full time. And then lately I've been doing a lot on the product management side on our Event Hapily tool and guiding the direction on what the second version or evolution of that's going to be. So it's really all over the place.
You're not really doing very much, are you, right now? It sounds like your job is very confined to doing absolutely very little.
But dude, it's so fun. That's the thing. Like the reason I came to Hapily is like just the idea of people building apps on HubSpot is just extremely exciting to me because, of course, like you've been in the HubSpot space forever. I'm sure you've had those moments where you're like, man, I really just wish I could just do this thing.
Oh, absolutely.
This feature. And to be part of a company that's just focused on saying, what are those things that people are saying, man, I really just wish it did this. And to be the folks that can say, oh, okay, let's make it do that is awesome. And selfishly, I want to see HubSpot do more. So to play a small role in like making that happen, it's fun no matter what crazy thing I'm doing from day to day. So yeah,
that's awesome. So let's start with Events Hapily. What is it?
Yeah.
What's it solving for people?
For sure. So Event Hapily, I'll put it out into the world that I'm assuming listeners of this podcast are somewhat familiar with HubSpot, right?
You can make that assumption.
We'll make that assumption, right? Given the science in the background. So the easiest way to explain it to someone who knows HubSpot is if you think about HubSpot as a platform, okay, it's really only a couple of pieces of like smart data structure, automation, and CMS elements away from being like an event management platform, truly, right? So what we set out to do with Event Hapily is we knew, and I definitely knew because I've been watching it for years, being an onboarding specialist and a trainer and then doing solutions engineering stuff, is that like people wanted to be able to do event management on HubSpot. The problem is all the apps out there that do event management, the integration with HubSpot is like always an afterthought. And it's generally a pretty contact sync. And that's basically it. Right. And so what we set out to do is we said, hey, a lot of companies are obviously running events, be it virtual or in person or whatever it may be, right? What can we do to make HubSpot better equipped to actually handle all the nuances of that and be able to get that event data right all alongside your sales data, your marketing data, your customer service data, all things by which your event information and your event data touch and have an impact on in 1,000 different ways, right? And we basically said, what would event management look like on HubSpot, right? So if you really think about what our app does, is it really fills in the 3 big missing puzzle pieces that HubSpot needs to be able to handle event management, right? So what you end up with is a new set of tools inside of HubSpot that lets you in a very customizable and either a simple or an extremely complex way manage your in-person events, your hybrid events, your virtual events, and not only from the perspective of, hey, we're a company that hosts events, but also from the perspective of we're a company that goes to a lot of trade shows and conferences and we capture leads. And I'm sure you know how much of a pain in the butt that can be when people are like
very much so.
Yeah, you know this, right? And so we're like, how can we take all those problems and solve them with good data structure inside of HubSpot? Because the data model of event management is very nuanced and very complex, right? You can't just measure everything on a contact record. What are the biggest things that are a pain in the butt to do that we can solve with like really smart automations and workflows? And then what sort of interaction does all that data need with your website, right? So things like CMS modules that show event listings, taking HubSpot forms and doing things I never thought were possible with them through CMS modules to be able to handle things like multi-person registration, session selection, all using native HubSpot forms and solving the things that are really difficult about using HubSpot forms or something like event management, which is way different than like a form for just like lead capture on a landing page, right? So it's really just this giant combination of custom objects, CMS modules, workflow actions that you can really put together in this beautiful symphony to build the event management system of your dreams and get it all right next to the data that it touches. People talk a lot about like return on investment when it comes to event stuff. And what's beautiful is, or what's typically pretty hard about that is like your return, which in HubSpot world is generally managed through deals, is generally completely separate from wherever you track the investment of the event.
That's correct.
Right. But a really beautiful thing is when you get it all inside of the CRM, all of a sudden that stuff becomes pretty easy, right? Because it's all there. It's all speaking the same language. And so we've built this just really cool app to help people handle all that stuff. And we can dive deeper into it.
That's awesome.
Kind of what it is.
Are you noticing when people come to events happily that this is the first time they have a solution even to do this, or are they generally migrating from another events tool to events happily?
Yeah, great question. So usually, well, it depends. So like a lot of folks that are doing things like just Zoom, like webinars or something like that, they're generally using like the integration that HubSpot already has, right? The problem is it gets really difficult to track a lot of the other things around that, right? Things like ROI and then being able to even just like the way you represent data over time of people going to these. And I think also the big thing there is the connection to things like building landing pages in order to be able to, if you're doing like 10 webinars a week, right? That's a lot of landing pages to build, right? That's a lot of forms to create, right? Through dynamic content and things like that, we make that a lot easier, right? But then you got the folks that are coming from, well, you get the folks that are still coming from the spreadsheets, which is like incredibly ironic.
That's so common.
It's really funny wow, you did a great job getting out of the spreadsheet to manage your contacts, your deals, your companies, your tickets, right? And that's all working great in HubSpot. And then it's like, how are you doing your event management? Noah, the spreadsheets that I have seen that people still use to manage their events are grotesque. It's brutal. And like what's beautiful about an object inside a HubSpot, right? We create like an event object. It gives you this really wonderful way to interact with that data and tie it into everything else, which is cool, right? So that's like another folks like, yeah, we're doing it all manually in like spreadsheets. And then you got the folks that are coming from your Eventbrites or your Goldcasts or your like insert event management tool here. And the big problem with them generally is they're like, yeah, it's got an integration with HubSpot, but it's just pushing over contact properties. And every single time someone goes to an event, it's getting overwritten, right?
Yeah.
And we can't really do anything with it. And we can't keep that historical instance logged somewhere around this is the time that Noah went to this event and this was his badge number and these are the sessions he signed up for and these are the ones he did or did not attend, things like that, right? So that's another big thing. And then the other one is folks just trying to use the HubSpot marketing events object, which is still, for whatever reason, hidden in the bowels of the index pages and not something that's like front and center. And until literally just now, not even connected to reporting, and you can't control the way the object works, and it's very much a closed garden. So a lot of times people that are frustrated with the lack of innovation there, if you will, right? So it's generally those four areas is what we're seeing. Yeah.
Is there like a minimum? You mentioned the two different use cases. Maybe your team is participating at trade shows and events, and you're simply trying to capture contacts. The other one is you're actually putting together events, whether in person, online, whatever the case may be. Is there a minimum number of events that a company says, hey, at this point, we need a tool like Events Hapily to manage this? You could say there's eventually a cliff that you're like, all right, I need a tool at this point. It's too much to just do doing that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we don't bill like other event tools do, right? So for example, most of the event solutions you're going to see out there, they're always going to have scaled billing depending on like how many events you're doing, right? We're going to do that at the beginning, but then we immediately ran into the same bad vibes that like HubSpot contact pricing ran into. Yeah. And we also didn't want to be like the other guys, right? So like now we charge like a flat rate. So what kind of depends there is like, how much of a problem do you have because you're running an events, and what's it worth it to actually solve? Because it's hard to say like a certain amount of events because people are getting different things out of the events that they go to. Like you might go to 1 or 2 trade shows a year, and that alone might make it worth it. If you're going there and capturing like an insane amount of leads, and you don't want to spend hours and hours doing, imports and manual associations and appending drop down fields and all this other crap that just takes so much time out of your day. But then even like after the event, you got to remember people are selling to those folks, and we've got a lot of really cool workflow actions that will like automatically attribute those deals created later down the line back to events that people like went to, right? So even when you're not running an event, the app is doing work in the background to be able to like do some like deal attribution to like things like event attendance and stuff like that, right? So it has its uses even if you're not doing like an event every week or every month or anything like that.
Yeah. So it really comes down almost to there's a point in time that you like as a manual effort. I always think of it like there's different levers you can pull whenever you look at making an investment in a tool. Are you trying to save money? Or are you trying to make money? Or are you trying to increase productivity? And it sounds like everyone has that predetermined amount. Okay, I want to improve my customer engagement by, rather than having to wait 2 weeks to upload that list from the marketing department, everything is happening automatically, which is fantastic. Or maybe it's simply, I have 5 people who are doing all this manual labor. Events Hapily can literally save me all this time, and they can work on more productive activities.
Yeah. And what's interesting is like we've actually found some like really wild use cases for it, right? Because like, here's the thing, like you can also use Event Hapily. Like the word event is like has in HubSpot land, it has 1,000 different definitions, right? Even in the event management land, it has 1,000 different definitions, right? So for example, some more non-traditional stuff we've seen is you could be a company that's just like hosting trainings and like selling training courses. In theory, those are like little mini events, right? And then you've got your events, you've got your sessions underneath it that are like all the different trainings in like your 12-week training session or whatever. You can use it for that. We don't position ourselves as a training tool, but you can totally use it as one to track attendance.
I hear a new type of branding for it. So you just launch a product, make a tweak, and call it something else.
Totally. So there's that piece. What's interesting is like we have one company that's using like the lead capture features, but it's not like they're going to these events. It's actually like sales reps setting up lunch and learns at these different companies. And they're like these big kind of things that they put on, and they go there, they set up these lunch and learns, and then they capture leads at those lunch and learns that they create. And then that runs like their deal attribution stuff down the line as well. So there's all this Events are very much a spectrum in terms of how you define them, right?
Yes.
And so we've seen people use it in like a lot of different ways, which has been super interesting outside of the very traditional, we're hosting a webinar or we're going to do an in-person event or like something like that, right? So yeah, it's
And we work heavily in the association space. And I know the challenges you guys are solving for would also be challenges they have, especially as more of these associations are moving to something like a HubSpot from a
yep,
traditional AMS that was managing those events for them,
yep,
which is
yeah,
completely changing. So you've opened up new market opportunities, which I think goes back to your concept of happily enabling organizations to use HubSpot that may otherwise not have been able to without these tools.
yeah.
Um,
Well, and what I was going to say, like the other thing, like you get down to like you're talking about the AMS thing, and I think a lot about I see people using HubSpot for TS stuff and basically like building different pieces of software like on this platform and taking out traditionally what you would think about as like a CMS. Like again, like we've taken it and turned it into an event management platform. What the real unique thing about this that I think is so interesting, right, is that when you think about it, we just plug in these additional tools that HubSpot is missing, right? But it is still like on you to go in and build the
Correct.
event management system of your dreams. And that's the beautiful part of instead of us creating a totally separate product that just integrates with HubSpot, we're giving HubSpot an injection of these tools that solve for the things that are a real pain in the butt when it comes to event management. But then you got to remember, you're still in HubSpot. You have access to everything else that HubSpot gives you, all the other customization you can do, how creative you can get with automation, how creative you can get with your data structure and records and all these different things. There is nothing stopping you from creating whatever you want with this or weaving it into something existing that you have. The best part is it's an event management system that's not beholden to the way
Awesome.
some third party app works. You can build it to work however you want, which is scary to some people. When you have a partner, it's no problem because they can do anything that they want. But that's the really cool thing. It's, oh man, you wish your third party event management system worked like a little bit different. That's not a problem in Event Happily because you can get it to work however you want because it's surrounded by this full suite of a platform on all sides of it, right? It's just now letting that platform do more that has to do with event management, right? And so like you get to take advantage of all these other things and weave it into every single hub and every way that you can imagine, right? Like I can't wait to get into having event management stuff like affect this new lead scoring stuff and like engagement scores and like all this new stuff you're seeing in Service Hub and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be
It sounds so exciting and fun.
ultimate level of anything is possible when it's inside of the app versus being a third party one just integrating.
In Max, we spent a lot of time talking about Event Happily, and it's
Yeah.
not the only cool tool that you have out there right
You got
now.
7 more hours. I can keep going
I
on
mean,
event.
heck, we just keep going here. But there's another tool that has been a true pain point in the HubSpot
Mhm.
ecosystem, and that's really CPQ.
Yep.
And a lot of times that can be a hindrance for people actually making the switch from whatever application they're on now to HubSpot. So they generally need to
Yep.
leverage a third-party tool. And there's a lot of well-known
Sure.
third-party CPQ tools out there, but you built your own. Quote happily. Am I saying that
Yes.
correctly?
Yeah, you're
Okay,
correct.
sure. Quote
Yeah.
happily,
Oh,
which, and of course, this particular podcast is being recorded probably a couple months before it launches. So it is
Yep.
out now. But by the
Yes, it is
time
out
people
now.
start watching this podcast,
It'll
it's,
be out in the ecosystem a little bit, and it'll probably
yeah,
have way more features than I'm going to tell you about right now because
yeah.
we're moving fast on
Let's
this thing.
let's just
Yeah,
talk about this because this is a
for sure.
super exciting
Yep.
rollout.
Yeah, it's really cool. So quote happily, right? HubSpot quoting, while I think it's cool and it's great for small businesses that it's just, I need to give you a piece of paper with a bunch of line items that tells you how much something costs, right? It's good for that, right? But especially when you start to see HubSpot move more up market and be a lot more capable of handling larger teams with a lot more complex requirements and bigger organizations and larger project libraries and more expectations around how pricing should work when it comes to different customers and things like that, integrations with other ERP systems or e-commerce systems or whatever it may be, right? You're seeing HubSpot be able to handle a whole lot more,
Mhm.
except when it comes to functionality around quoting. Right now, I think a lot of that's going to evolve. Don't get me wrong. Like you can see the push that they're pushing into
Mhm.
Commerce Hub. The problem is that they are heavily focusing on billing,
Yeah.
not CPQ, fundamentally separate part of the entire chain. And it is something that HubSpot has straight up told us we're not going to go super deep into that area. We want to lean on the app marketplace to extend CPQ in the way it needs to be, which is smart because CPQ can be very different industry to industry and company to company. And there's going to need to be a lot more solutions out there beside us that attack it in the same way we do, but niche into different industries and stuff like that, right? That's just the nature of how it goes. But with Quote Happily, the idea there, the way it all started is we knew, because we talk to HubSpot sales reps all the time. We talk to HubSpot partners all the time. That's who we sell through. Obviously, we talk to customers too, right? We don't ignore them. But the thing, we knew we wanted to make a CPQ product because one, we obviously needed it for ourselves, right? A lot of that comes down to we need more at HubSpot quoting. But two, we kept hearing it from people like, hey, fix quoting. And so there was a couple of like really common things that we kept hearing as we're talking to HubSpot solutions engineers, HubSpot sellers that are losing deals to other CRMs because of CPQ, right? We all come from, well, not me, but like other people at that company come from working at solutions partners. They see it too as well, right? The big thing with HubSpot quoting, right, is that it was missing a lot of key stuff. One, it's just like guidance, governance, and guardrails around what actually can be done when you're quoting stuff in HubSpot, right? So it's, oh, my sales rep can just go in there and just quote a 30% discount and that's fine. No, it's not fine. All right. So a lot of control over what can and cannot be done. Sure. Can you turn on approvals? Yeah. But that means literally every single quote is going to an approval and that slows things down. So like lack of an advanced approval process was a big thing. And that's often where you see people moving to a Glean quote or a Panda Doc or like a Deal Hub or something like that. And the big one is price books, right? We kept hearing, like, I remember every single time when I was a solutions engineer at HubSpot and we were doing like a Sales Hub demo, I'd hear the word price books and I would just like, my stomach would implode because I'm like, man, I'm about to tank this whole thing right now, right? Because it was either one, no, we don't do that. And then it was an instant disqualification, right? Or it was like, no, we don't do it, but we have really good integrations with these other apps. And don't get me wrong, that's great. Like integrations are really important to have. The problem is there's a lot of other CRMs that do this a lot more natively, right? Or the other problem is like that slows down the sales cycle. It also means that's a whole nother company you got to go deal with. Now, granted, of course, Hapily is a third party, but going to another like totally detached, non-HubSpot focused third party presents its challenges, right?
Agreed.
One, you're not building HubSpot quotes anymore. Two, you're working out of some other quoting tool that may or may not have a great integration with HubSpot. Three, you're working with someone who's more CRM agnostic, right? Which means like their integration with HubSpot isn't necessarily their top priority, right? Like they want to get people who have data inside of HubSpot into that other tool and using that other tool. And they don't necessarily have a lot of skin in the game when it comes to working with HubSpot to try to get people to use HubSpot versus like any other CRM it works with, right? Correct. So that's tough. But also it's just like, for your reps that are using this stuff, like it's not a great experience to be like, all right, I got to manage everything I'm doing in terms of communication and managing the deal and everything in HubSpot. Oh, but then I got to go to this other tool to go make a quote, right? Or even if it like launches a little card or something, it's still bringing me somewhere else that I have to do my job. And then does it come back into HubSpot? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Still, it slows things down. It slows the deal from happening for HubSpot, but even when you're using it, it's not necessarily a very fluid experience. Like we very much believe in keeping people inside of HubSpot as much as humanly possible and getting HubSpot to do more. So really what we sat down and said, hey, we just need to make HubSpot do this and very intentionally make HubSpot quoting do this, right? We didn't just want to make another app that was very friendly to HubSpot, but you still ended up doing quoting outside of HubSpot and like making something that wasn't a HubSpot quote at the end of the day. Because we want this to like work with things like Commerce Hub. We want you to take that quote and be able to turn it into an invoice because there's going to be so much happening in HubSpot downstream from the CPQ part of the sales cycle that we want to make sure that customers that use our stuff can flow into that and use it, right? Agreed. So the big things in terms of what it is one, we've completely rebuilt and reimagined the quote building experience in HubSpot. So while it's still a HubSpot quote you create at the end of the day, the way you create it is way easier and way better, right? And it actually replaces the quote builder inside of HubSpot, right? So instead of going through like the carousels, like vanilla version
Sure.
of creating a HubSpot quote, we've consolidated that entire experience into one single page using a CRM extension, right?
Wow.
So instead of going left and right, back to forth, just to make one choice on all these different pages, you have it all just laid out in front of you, right?
Awesome.
And that was really important because in order for us to do things like enforcing rules on what you can and cannot do when you're creating quotes, we had to have our own interface. The other option was to make a HubSpot Chrome extension, which it's against TOS. It's also a giant pain in the butt because as soon as HubSpot's interface changes, you break the whole thing, right? And not everyone's using Chrome, right? Not everyone wants to use extensions either, right? So like we had to make our own experience inside of HubSpot. So like when you install it, step one is, well, you go set it up first, but when you're ready to roll it out, you go replace the quote card and the line items card with our own ones that provide our own experience, right? So streamlined rapid quote builder is the first piece. The second piece is the rules engine, right? So the rules engine comes down to, again, like giving yourself guidance, guardrails, and governance over the quote building process, right? People shouldn't be able to just quote whatever they want, whenever they want, for how much they want. Like there needs to be guardrails around stuff, right? There also needs to be guidance. So like a good example of guidance is, hey, when someone adds a certain product to a quote, and that product should be eligible for a discount because the company has spent a certain amount of money with you, or something like that. You should be able to like nudge that rep in real time to say, hey, these guys have spent $10,000 with us. Like maybe give them a 5% discount on this, instead of just assuming the sales rep should know what to do in that situation. So this interface allows you to drop in like notifications. It even allows you to block the creation of a quote if someone breaks a rule, right?
Ooh,
so for example, if you don't want your reps quoting things at more than a 10% discount, you can build one simple rule that just says, hey, if someone puts more than a 10% discount on a line item, don't even let them build the quote. We don't want to waste time with an approval. Just say, you're not allowed to do that. Reduce the discount on it. This kind of feeds in, like rules fits into this.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's huge, right? You got to be able to set some boundaries on what sales reps can do, right? So there's that piece. Rules. When it comes to the thing around like approvals, though, this is where it gets really interesting, right? Native HubSpot quoting, when you have approvals, you're approving literally every single quote. Unless you build workflows to automatically push it through the process.
Sure.
You still gotta wait for that quote to get approved, and you can't get the link for it and like all that stuff. And that sucks. Like it slows down the sales process. So we were like, hey, wouldn't it be great if when someone's building a quote, it only went into an approval process if it actually needed to, right? So for example, what's really cool about this is you can build rules that say, hey, if this quote meets whatever rule that you've created, then just say, hey, just so you know, this is going to have to go to an approval. Right. But if it's fine, right, and the rep was able to build that quote without breaking any rules, we should be able to just let that one go out the door without human intervention. Right. So the way it works is, one, again, you set the rules. And when you're building rules, you're able to look at anything associated to the deal and basically say if any objects associated to the deal meet some sort of criteria, or if any line items on the quote or one-time discounts or whatever, right, you can apply these rules, right? So what's really neat about this is, like, for the first time in HubSpot history, we're in a place where you could say, hey, you know what? We'll let a sales rep at their own discretion give discounts of up to 5%. That's fine, right? And again, apply this like discounting logic to basically anything, right? It doesn't have to be discounting, but that's like the easiest way to articulate it and universal way to think about it. So it's like, hey, you know, we'll let the reps discount up to 5% on whatever. If they discount anywhere between 5 and 10%, we're going to send it through an approval. If they try to discount over 10%, we're not even going to waste time on the approval. Right. And so that's great because you're reducing the workload it takes for the rest of the sales org to participate in the sales process, because they only have to approve what you absolutely need to approve. And you can stop the stuff that, like, you know, is immediately going to get shut down before they even create the quote. right? So it's really cool. And then the other thing that we did with approvals is not only can you set a rule to put it into an approval stage or like into an approval status or state or whatever, right? We made quote workflows actually useful, right? So what we did is we built 2 quote workflow actions. One that actually sends the quote to be approved by someone, right?
Sure.
And another one that will actually publish the quote, right? Now, it's smarter than just publishing the quote because anyone who's built quote workflows before, oh, Max, you could just do a set property action that'll just change the status from pending to approved or whatever. Sure. What our workflow action does is it's smart enough to look at the quote and see if there are any outstanding approvals in different workflows that haven't been completed yet, right? So like you could technically have your quote go through 10 different approval workflows. It's only going to take it out of the approval stage once it's done going through the other ones. If it gets to the end and I'm supposed to take you out of approval now, it goes, let me look and see if anyone else still has an outstanding approval for this. And if it does, it goes, I'm just not going to do anything. And it's always the last one that'll check to see if it's the last one and then take it out. So if you got to get a quote approved by 18 people at once, like you're not going to want to do like a game of Plinko where it's like waiting to go through because that quote won't get approved for 6 months. But so it's like, it's built in really smart ways. But what's cool about this is instead of it just being like, here's one email address that you send the quotes to, and that's basically it, you can build the approval process of your dreams, right? So you could say, hey, if the quote's over 10K, send it to finance, right? And then when it's done with finance, check to see if there's any like product with SKU number 5465, right? If there is, send it over to Jeff to approve. And then once Jeff's done approving it, go send it over to the sales manager. So like you can do all this stuff using workflows, which you already know how to use, right? And it's like people have looked at quote workflows and said, this is what it should have been able to do the whole time. And we're finally giving it to that, which is cool. And then the last piece is price books. That's the last piece right now in terms of what's available at this moment. So price books. So the way price books works, we use it for a couple of different things outside of what you would normally think price books are for. So one, price books actually control, not only do they help you control prices, right? Sure. They control access to who can sell what, right? So for example, if you're like a team that's got 6 business units and 5 different sales teams, but you only got one HubSpot product library, because that's how it works, right? You can take the HubSpot products in your product library, divide them into price books, and then set rules that will set the price book based on the business unit or any other property, right? Let's say it's like, if we're selling outside of the US, here's this price book. If we're selling inside of the US, here's this price book. Like you can set them up however you need to, right? And so at a surface level, it is like almost a product catalog. It's, hey, in this situation, this and only this of the greater subsection of the product library, this is what you're allowed to sell. So you can deploy that in a billion different ways, right? But then the thing that we're working on now that's going to be available shortly is pricing rules for the price books, right? So if you think of like the way people try to do it today is what they'll do is they'll take the same product and they'll duplicate it like 7 times and just change the price. And then they'll put it into folders and then they'll go, it's a price book. And you just got to hope and pray people are putting the right products on a quote when they're looking at 7 different ones where all the thing is different as the price, right? What we're doing is we're building pricing rules. So just like you can set rules on what you can do with the quote, it's going to be dynamic rules of how the pricing is automatically adjusted for that same product based on the price book it's in. So you'll be able to do something where it's like, cool, here's our price book. And let's say this is like our silver tier pricing or something like that. You'll be able to set up a rule that just says any product that's in here has a 20% discount across the board, right? Or this specific product has a 5.2% discount, but this product only, and everything else is the same. Or maybe this products that have a property of X that equals Y has this discount on it. So you don't have to duplicate the same product 7 different times to get different prices. You can just have that one product and the price dynamically changes, which is a godsend for things like line item reporting and stuff like that, right? Because you're not saying, well, all of these 7 products are the same product, even though they're not, because the pricing's like, you don't want to do that. You know what I mean? So we're just solving for all of that. But what we had to do is we had to create like our own interface inside of HubSpot using a CRM card that would get powered by all these things that you set up in the admin panel. So we really think it's going to be something that's one, going to bring a ton of value to HubSpot customers, because here's the thing. When it comes to HubSpot quoting, I always like to use this analogy. Maybe this isn't going to translate that well to like audio, but look at my arm and imagine my arm is like all the features in HubSpot quoting, right? There's always this cliff at the end, right? Where people go, man, I really want to use HubSpot quoting, but if it only had price books, if it only had advanced approvals, if it only had product bundling, if it only had rules and regulations, right? And what we found is like, there's so many people that just get to the end of this cliff and go, damn, I've got to either look at another CRM that has CPQ built in, or I got to go look at a third-party app. And the problem is, especially with the third-party apps, most people just need that one or two things that HubSpot doesn't have. And then they go and look at these I'm not going to name any specifically, but they look at these third-party apps and they go, man, I don't need all of that. And what? It costs the same amount as my sales seat? That's crazy. Right? So they end up just going, well, I'm going to go with the CRM that already has the half-baked CPQ stuff or the CPQ stuff built into it. What we're trying to do, essentially with Quote Happily, we're not trying to be like a full-fledged standalone CPQ app. We're trying to take HubSpot's quoting functionality cliff and extend it and drag it as far as we can so less people have to jump off of it. Right.
Yeah. I mean, you're really solving for instead of all those edge cases out there that some of these standalone applications are solving for, you really are solving for the majority of use cases out there that essentially the extensionability of what is currently in HubSpot. Now, you guys said, hey, here are the things that are missing. So if you're out there and you're looking for a CPQ solution, or you say, hey, HubSpot got pretty close, Quote Happily, I think will take them all the way. And I'm really excited.
I guarantee you it's closer now.
What suggestions do you have for just people looking at apps in the HubSpot ecosystem, like how to look for them, how to find them, and what to really think about when you think, okay, I need some app?
Okay, I'm gonna ask you to participate in this answer. Let me ask you this: have you, as a partner, ever run into customers where they're like, "Hey, we want to do XYZ with HubSpot," and you get into this kind of awkward conversation with them where you say, "Yeah, HubSpot can do that, but you just have to download an app," and then they go, "Wait a minute."
The answer is yes. Here's a link. Here's all the information, and here's our guide. And sometimes the reviews are good, sometimes they're not.
Sure.
Maybe it's because it's an old app and it's 4 years ago review. Yes.
Then what's even more awkward is when you get the whole like, well, our sales rep said this could do everything. What do you mean I have to buy this other thing to get it to do whatever? And what's so interesting about this is how it's always been in Salesforce. Salesforce, there's a whole app exchange. There's an entire industry built around apps on Salesforce. Yet for some reason, there's still so many people that come into HubSpot being like, wait, I thought it was going to do everything. What do you mean I need to buy another app?
Well, the all-in-one messaging that can do everything is where that comes from. Yeah.
Here's the funny thing. These are the same people that'll go out and buy an iPhone and then pay $50 a day to go play Candy Crush, and they have no problem doing that, right? What I think needs to happen, and I only harp on this so much because, again, I spent the first year talking to partners here, and I always came across these partners that would go, hey, Max, we get it. We know HubSpot. We think your apps are super cool. However, we have trouble positioning them to customers because they just came fresh off of the whole HubSpot's the all-in-one platform. It'll do everything for you conversation. And they are flummoxed that they need to buy something else to get it to do something. The big thing that I'm trying to put out into the universe, and I don't know the best way of going around it, so all I do is just scream about it on TikTok and LinkedIn all day. There still needs to be a big mind shift that happens with HubSpot customers and maybe partners a little bit, and certainly with HubSpot sellers, right? Is that HubSpot is a platform, and let's take HubSpot out of the equation for a second. If you think about it, your CRM is like the iPhone for your business. Right? Yes. Think about this like from a human perspective. You use your iPhone, Android, smartphone. You use your smartphone to communicate with the outside world, right? Well, guess what? Your CRM system does the same exact thing, right? It is in the comparison of I'm the human, here's the company, my iPhone That's the CRM to the business, right? It's where all the contacts are. It's how they send out information. It's where they store a lot of their very important information, right? It's how they communicate with the world. Imagine for a second if the iPhone came with every single freaking app in the App Store already pre-installed on it, right? Or if they tried to make the operating system do everything for everyone, no matter how niche the need or the use case was, right? The beauty of the iPhone platform, by the way, is that it comes with enough things that are universally useful to everyone that's using it. However, you have the freedom and the ability to go get a better calendar app or to go get an app that makes it does something it did not do out of the box, right? If every single app came pre-installed in the iPhone, it would be unaffordable, unusable, unscalable, and unsupportable. The same thing goes for a CRM platform, right? You shouldn't expect your CRM platform to literally do everything under the sun for every single industry, every single use case, every single type of company, right? You are buying the base framework of your platform, and then you have the flexibility and freedom to do what you want to make it yours. That's the beautiful reason why workflows can be built in any way that they want instead of just here are the 3 workflows that this one sends emails, this one updates and whatever. That's not how it works. The idea is that you should be able to get a platform that's still like affordable and universally usable and not bogged down by all of this very niche industry stuff. You should be able to pick and choose what you need and not be burdened by the cost of other customers that need stuff that you don't, right? That's also the beauty of being able to buy in through the hubs, right?
Agreed.
If you just need Sales Hub right now, get Sales Hub, right? But like you shouldn't have to pay more for HubSpot because the insurance industry needs a very specific app that does underwriting for a very specific industry to do some funky stuff in HubSpot. Why should you pay for more than that if you're the hair salon, right? So there's a reason why, like there needs to be a mindset shift of like,
I love this analogy. I love the analogy of using an iPhone or a smartphone. And it doesn't come with everything it's really designed to communicate. You can text, you can call. Everything else is for your own personal use or whatever that particular application you're looking for. I think that's a brilliant analogy. And thank you for sharing that because I'm gonna steal that one a little bit if it's okay with you. I'll start
really
evangelizing it.
Push back on, I'll tell you that.
Yes,
so you go, it's just like your iPhone and open it up, but I guarantee you're playing Farmville and spending a bunch of money on diamonds or something. You're going to look at your CRM a little bit differently.
Max, thank you so much for joining me. This has been like a fantastic conversation. If you were unsure of what Hapily is or what they do, check it out. And Max, how do our listeners find out more information about you and Hapily?
Totally. So one, go follow me on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn so we can actually talk, right? Hapily.com. It's got all of our apps, everything that we build right on there. We also have a YouTube channel that we pour a ton of content and love into. So go search, I think it's like @BuiltHapily or something on YouTube, or just search Hapily HubSpot and you can find us there. And then we've got a lot of podcast content. We're just trying to like really crank up a content machine. So as long as you like follow the LinkedIn page for Hapily and me and Dax and everyone there, and you'll be inundated with way more content that you want about apps and stuff like that. So yeah, Max, we're everywhere.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us so much. That really wraps it up today. Again, Up Your Stack Podcast is a weekly podcast that features HubSpot app partners who've either built their apps on HubSpot or integrated with HubSpot. Again, I'm your host, Noah Burke. Max, again, thank you so much for joining the show. This was fantastic. I can't wait to see what else you guys come out with next. We're already promoting it internally to our clients, so you have one fan here already.
My ears.
Awesome.